But let's go ahead and start setting up the first match here. Alb987 versus GeneraL. And you can see their lineups, and it shows exactly what I was talking about. We see two Druids for Alb987. I guess he didn't watch the Conquest video. Not two different Warlock decks. But we'll get that fixed in a moment. But it looks like Warrior's banned away from GeneraL.
Right, so if GeneraL lost his Warrior, that most likely means that Alb also lost his Warrior. If I'm just looking at the classes correctly there. And that makes sense. Warrior's just been very strong. Pirate Warrior is almost publicly enemy #1, primarily just off representation for the Wild ladder. You look at a lot of statistics, and Pirate Warrior makes up about 15 to 20% of ranked play in Wild in general. But that doesn't mean that it's too strong. In fact, people say it's not even the strongest deck in the format. It's just that it's very convenient and very powerful.
Yeah, it's powerful enough and fast enough to where you can grind out a bunch of games. But when you're talking about a tournament like this with a lot of stakes, sometimes slowing it down, bringing those decks that have those slightly higher win rates that are slightly more powerful but take a lot of time to play and a lot of effort to play can be the right choice. And we're going to get to see that now. Shamans can go one of a bunch of ways in Wild. There's Aggro Shaman, which is one of the most powerful decks, but there's also the N'Zoth Control Shaman. Mid-range Shaman is still pretty powerful. Jade Shaman still has some games, so there's a ton of Shamans. But it's time for game number 1, so we're going to get to see for ourselves. It's going to be Alb987 on the Shaman and GeneraL on the Mage.
All right, so what looks like to be a N'Zoth mage of some kind from GeneraL. Now, it could end up being a Reno mage as well. And either forms of it is just a control style that's very powerful and dominant onto the board. And part of the thing of what makes mage really strong is that there's actually kind of a debate of how many cards that could actually go into a mage deck that you want to take in or take out. If you're playing Reno, you can justify 35 to 40 cards these days for the mage class. On the other side, Alb having Crackle does kind of imply that he's playing Aggro Shaman, and I think Aggro Shaman is one of the best decks in the format. It was prior to rotation, and it still is, TJ.
Yeah, it's just an incredibly powerful deck. The old combo of Tunnel Trog plus Totem Golem is still very much so present in Wild, as you can see, but the turn 1 Doomsayer on the coin is going to put that to a stop.
Yeah, and Alb987, you can see that he even teched his Shaman specific against Pirate Warriors, or just Pirates in general. And he did ban the Warrior, which makes it a little bit interesting, because Aggro Shaman tends to be very good against Pirate Warriors. One of the few decks that is actually very strong against that deck consistently.
And you can sort of see, even just a little bit right now, what you were talking about before, about how you can justify so many cards in the deck. And one of the key differences between Arcanologist and Mad Scientist there is, sometimes you can't afford to play both. They're both incredibly powerful, but they sort of work against each other a little bit. Arcanologist pulling secrets into your hand, whereas Mad Scientist pulls them directly, into play from your deck. So if you draw, double Arcanologist early, if you're playing 2 ofs, then it's tough. But most likely Reno Mage, as we're seeing like Gluttonous Ooze and one Mad Scientist and Arcanologist, pretty much gives that away.
Yeah, and of course, pretty good sequencing coming out from GeneraL in the previous turn as well. The whole Mad Scientist and Arcanologist interaction. You want to draw that card before it ends up being drawn naturally anyways. So he wants to get more efficient draws as time moves on. Looks like he's prioritizing trying to remove this Flaming Faces over 2 turns as opposed to developing the Pilot Shredder. And I think that's partially because he's also afraid of what the Death Lord might pull out. There are some really powerful cards like another Flaming Faces or Eye of Blackpaw.
Yeah, Death Lord's an interesting card because essentially if you trade it off on your turn, you give your opponent the minion, but you also essentially give it charge because they get to attack with it for free. A lot of times you want to make sure that you're forcing your opponent to get the Death Lord out unless you know that you're going to have removal behind it.
Yep. Absolutely. Now, GeneraL picks up Fireball, so he has an opportunity to still continue to play the removal game and keep his minions alive, but it's a little mana inefficient, and I wonder if he's thinking about something else. Okay, and he has Duplicate, which kind of does lean towards a N'Zoth variant of the Reno Mage. Now, still have to kind of see what's going to happen, but with more Death Rattles coming into the hand, I have to imagine that's the case.
Yeah, Pilot Shredder is usually a really good card, but again, there's so many slots in this mage that if you're not playing the N'Zoth version, a lot of times you want to clean that up with, either more removal or, something that helps you more than just putting a well-statted minion onto the board. With N'Zoth, of course, it's going to come back later on in the game. It will give you that final push that you need that sort of acts as a win condition. And Alb's just sort of, you know, he's already running quite low on resources. Of course, in Wild, you have a little bit more access to additional damage. Crackle is a card that I'm sure a lot of people miss, because 6 damage for 2 mana can be pretty good.
Yeah, it ends up being really strong. Oh my goodness, another Flame Wreath Face is being pulled out. I thought GeneraL was in a really good spot already, in the seeing that he had Doomsayer and both of his secrets, both of his secret activators. But now it seems like he's definitely in a bit of a pickle here. He has to be reliant on his opponent not having very good strong follow-ups. He does have 2 more Deathlords to hide behind, and it is 16 health, but it's only a temporary band-aid, and he has to find a way to get past these Flame Wreath Faceless. He does have a Volcanic Potion and a Fireball for removal, but it's not going to be able to be cleared this turn.
Yeah, he can Fireball ping on the right Flame Wreath Faceless and trade his Piloted Shredder into the left Flame Wreath Faceless. It still leaves the Bloodcell Corsair at 3 attack with the Flamethrower Totem on board, but this removes the majority of the power from the board, and that's really what it's about. It's just every turn trying to minimize the amount of damage that you take, because you're going to have a definite advantage going into the later stages of the game. Your average draw is much better than the average draw of the Aggro Shaman.
All right, well, the Taunt Totem ends up getting into the way of this Mad Bomber. How much damage does Alb have at his peak here with the Lava Burst and the Crackle? Crackle can hit for 7 with the Spell Damage Totem, and Lava Burst can hit for 6, so it's 13. And that kind of gets him within critical striking distance. From this point forward, if he can able to get a little bit more damage in, he might be able to kill GeneraL.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Well, one of the tough things about the Galactic Crawler is, of course, that if you have a pirate on the board, you have to eat your own pirate in order to play it. But it looks like Alb just wants to get additional power and health on the board to make his board a little bit more resilient. He understands that he's effectively out of resources to flood onto the board, so he needs to make sure that he's setting himself up for the best possible chance to have lethal damage over the next couple of turns. But with double Deathlords in the way, and not that many great things with both Flame Wreath Faces is already killed, I think he's pretty confident that these Deathlords are going to be able to stop a bunch of damage.
Well, it doesn't pick up more burn. I think part of the thing was maybe he can get an opportunity to get past these Deathlords, but looks like he's just going to use Crackle and try to pull out something really strong. Picks up another Flame Tongue Totem. It's a little inconvenient, but better than nothing. And Alb's still going to be looking for ways to get some damage in, either through direct or maybe even pick up Sir Finley so he can find Life Tap or Hunter Hero Power.
Manic Soulcaster. An interesting card. It's got a lot of strategic uses, but it can also sometimes be a little bit of a trap. If you Manic Soulcaster a minion that really isn't going to have much impact later on in the game, it sort of dilutes your deck a little bit to the point where you have to ask yourself, well, is it worth putting, say, a Deathlord back in my deck? Is that what I want to draw over, say, Alexstrasza later in the game? Because you're giving yourself an extra moment to draw that. But, I mean, GeneraL just keeps clearing the board turn after turn after turn.
Yeah, and now it looks like pretty much the worst is over. It's opponent down to just 1 card. And while we did have a moment of panic with the Flame Wreath Faceless, GeneraL has pretty much just weathered the storm here. Ooh, it's a good draw, and that's pretty much the only one that could really bail him out of the situation, because that's his best card by a mile here. Yeah,
that or, as you mentioned earlier, Sir Finley.
Sir Finley
would probably
good
be
too.
The best draw. If Sir Finley picked up something that helps him, whether it is that Hunter Hero Power or Life Tap, or I guess that's really it.
It just gives Alb a way to spend his mana, because part of the downside of aggressive decks later in stages of the game is that you can't really spend all your mana. You're just playing 1 or 2 cards in hero powering. In this case, GeneraL's going to still clean up, stay really calm, really good sequencing, making sure that he can keep his Deathlord alive as long as possible. He picked up the Pyrospike trading into it, and it is the strongest minion he has available to himself as well. I like that he's also not rushing to play things like Ice Block. I think a lot of people feel like, I want to get Ice Block down whenever, but he's realizing that he's not threatened to die in the next few turns here, so he can take his time on when he wants to play it.
Yeah, it's a really great point.
Alb needs to pick up something big here, and Tunnel Trog is not it. Picks up another Bloodsoul Corsair. At least he didn't draw it from his deck, but with 2 Flaming Faceless and Aya Blackpaw already played, what else could Alb really have gotten that was huge? Which, by the way, gets eaten by his opponent's Galaka Crawler.
Oh, man.
Yeah, this is just pretty much just done and dusted. GeneraL is going to play the Kazakhs just for extra good measure, but there's pretty much nothing Alb can do. I think even if he got Kazakhs, he'd be struggling at this point.
All right.
And that's going to be a concede. Game 1 goes to the GeneraL from Russia.
Yeah, it just felt like sort of an uphill battle for Alb that entire game, that he could never really get over the hump. And that Reno Mage, the Death Rattle Reno Mage, it does have late game potential with N'Zoth, but man, its anti-aggro tools, second to none.
Yeah, and that's kind of the important thing to emphasize with the Reno Mage deck, or just in Reno decks in general. A lot of them are very low curve these days, primarily because of the threat of aggressive decks. There's Pirate Warriors muck on ladder. There's a lot of aggro druids or egg druids, depending on what you want to call them. Now you even see aggro shaman. And because of Reno's deck's flexibility to scale into late game with powerful cards like Brand Bronzebeard, Kazakhs, and other ways you can package like Death Rattles, you don't have to have so much greed. A lot of people might be like playing like Sneasel, Shredder, some of these other really greedy stuff. You don't have to have all that. If you just have a Belcher, Shredder, a couple of early Death Rattles, you'll get a ton of value with N'Zoth.
Yeah, we can actually go ahead and take a look at probably the scariest moment in that game for GeneraL. And it was the moment that he was faced with the Flamery Faceless, just to set the stage here. Is GeneraL had a pretty big lead on the board, and Alb had to find the best possible way to get himself sort of a comeback in this. And we can roll it now. You see he's going to play Flame Tongue Totem. He's got nice totem placement here because he's going to be able to get the patches from the Bloodsoul Corsair, of course, which always spawns on that far side, and trade over into the Death Lord. And it's going to summon another Flamery Faceless.
Yeah, a lot of people might be confused, like, why did Alb not put the Bloodsoul Corsair position for the Flame Tongue? But he knew patches would come out on the right side.
Yeah.
And if he did, then he wouldn't be able to get that buff, wouldn't get that easy trade. Now, GeneraL, of course, having the ability to just clear everything, realizing that keeping Flame Tongue Totem alive isn't the end of the world, and because he has 2 Death Lords, he should be able to ride it all the way home. And one of the interesting things, too, is because he's able to adapt to the secret that was pulled off the Mad Scientist, because he had Duplicate being pulled there. Maybe I wonder if GeneraL is doing that deliberately. Like maybe that's another reason why he played Arcanologist first before the Scientist.
Yeah, very true, very true. But after those Flaming Faces were out of the way, GeneraL probably could feel like he's home free, because with the Death Lords to back it up, as you mentioned, not really too many big threats left to come. The only thing he'd be worried about would be that Sir Finley, but a great win for him in Game 1. And Alb, if his deck is chock full of aggressive decks and GeneraL's still got some anti-aggro tools left, it's going to be tough for him.
I think, especially in Wild right now, I think it'd be a little bit too risky just to go all in on one archetype. I can definitely see a balanced strategy being very good, so nothing can truly be targeted and out of the way. But at the same time, then you can't target something individually. I do think that in Wild, because right now, even though Wild's been existed for a while, it still hasn't been nearly as refined as Standard, primarily because there isn't as big of a player base, TJ.
Sure.
So I think that because the field is not nearly as easily calculated and predictable, it's better to just bring a diversified field of lineups.
That's a good point there, because a lot of times, if you look at like HCT, for instance, people know what other people are going to bring, or they think they know what other people are going to bring, so they can target one specific deck. But let's go ahead and move into game number 2. Alb is going to be on the Shaman once again, and GeneraL is going to be on the Warlock. And this appears to me like it's going to be a Reno Warlock. Well, there it is, Reno Warlock.
Yeah, you think so?
I mean, so there's not really many variants of like a control Warlock outside of Reno, especially in Wild. Of course, you can't play it in Standard at the moment, so Blood Bloom is all you got. But yeah, that's really the only thing that it could be.
True that, especially because Reno is in the hand. Alb has the J-Claws to start things off, and that's because he really wants to try and build a board proactively against his opponent. GeneraL has this Dirty Rat, which is a recipe for disaster if it pulls out the Flaming Faceless. So GeneraL's going to take this opportunity to recognize that my opponent is overloaded for 1, so the best minion he can develop is either a Tunnel Trog or a Sir Finley. We'll see what hero powers are available. Looks like he's just going to pick up Shapeshift from the Druid class, and that's probably just because it's the most raw damage. Everything else is pretty weak. The Warrior hero power is pretty bad for killing your opponent, and Paladin's a little bit delayed.
Yeah, Shapeshift is decent with Doomhammer. It's about the best you can get out of those choices, but
Right.
we'll see if he's even playing it. But Alb has patches in hand. I want to talk about a little bit of a tech inclusion for GeneraL here with the Kazan Mystic. And while there's actually quite a few decks that do run secrets, we saw the Reno Mage earlier. Secret Mage is still popular. Tempo Mage decks run secrets, and Secret Paladin is still a menace in Wild. So even though Kazan Mystic doesn't fully counter like a giant secret package, like, say Eater of Secrets, it has a bigger swing potential because you're taking the secret for yourself. So
That's right. That's right. Kazan Mystic is really, really powerful if it lands onto opponent's secret there. One thing that you're looking at right now is GeneraL is taking his time. Because he has Reno Jackson, he's feeling very confident that he can survive till turn 6. But he did not get an Area of Effect card with his Kazakus Potion. And now GeneraL's in a little bit of an awkward spot. Just has to not overextend and get too greedy here. Galaka Crawler is kind of nice for... but it doesn't really fit too much with everything here.
The Flaming Faces is really important because as the aggro shaman in this matchup, you are definitely focused on putting on enough pressure to force the Reno early and then piling on that, oh, Dan, I haven't talked about this in so long. It feels so good.
Don't say
the
it's TG.
post-Reno damage. Oh, love it.
Yeah, what TJ is referring to, for people who do not know what TJ is talking about, is just being sure that your opponent plays Reno and it just basically doesn't mean anything. It means that they just basically played equivalent of Frost Nova, which is stalling your board for 1 turn and you're back in that position where you're at like 8 health or less and then you just die.
Yeah.
And Alb doesn't have, he has actually a decent amount of burst from the hand. He's got 10 guaranteed on turn 6.
Yeah, and it's interesting for the Warlock player because you sort of have to flirt with disaster a little bit. If you see a big board, you don't want to play Reno. You want to try and remove the board first and then play Reno when you know that you're not going to be able to be taking that 15 damage or whatever it is the following turn. So sometimes you do have to take some risks in the matchup, but it's definitely something that you have to keep in your mind that, well, I need this Reno to not only heal me to full, but I need it to sort of contest the board the following turn as well.
Right, and I wonder if GeneraL feels like now's time to Reno, although he doesn't really have that many better options at this point because he still can't kill the Flaming Faceless, which is going to be able to attack again. Unless GeneraL has a removal option with the Kazakus Potion. I believe he did have a Polymorph, yeah, so that he is able to take that risk. But it's a pretty big one. It basically has a chance of doing nothing because your opponent already has a 1/1 on the other side.
Yeah, it is an armor gain potion as well. So it's not that big of a risk as it would be, say, if it was, resummon a minion or, deal AoE damage. Because it will get him to, 23 health after everything's said and done, even if it polymorphs the 1/1. We'll see. He's going to go for it.
Wow. If this lands, TJ, this could just win GeneraL the game. But he recognizes that if it misses, he could be flirting with disaster.
Takes a step back. He's like, think, GeneraL, think. Channel the arts of Sun Tzu.
Gonna be a tough proposition.
Oh, no!
He misses, and Alb is still in the game because of it. Has his greed gone too far? Alb picks up a Galaka Crawler, and that's not going to be helpful in this situation.
And I mean, it feels like GeneraL might be forced to play the Reno next turn just for the fear of damage. He understands that Alb has been holding on to those far left cards for like 3-4 turns in a row now. So he's got to have the read that that's burn damage. And there is 10 post-Reno damage on board. So Reno Jackson will effectively only heal him up to 20 if he wants to look at it that way.
Right, but it also puts out a 4/6 minion, which helps him get good trades.
Yeah.
He does have Drax, which is also another form of heal, and he does have this N'Zoth, which if he's played any Death Rattle minions to help him get to the point, we know that he hasn't, but Mistress of Mixture, Sludge Belcher also act as ways to get health onto the board.
This is one of those turns where you might have to take one of those risks and go for a play that's not Reno to try and clean up the board a little bit better and force your opponent to, continue to expend more resources before you play that Reno.
I don't know. I think playing Reno here gets your best chance of removing the Flaming Faces on the board. If anything you do, that thing still sticks around and you can just die. And like you said, TJ, based off the way Alb's been playing, he's been hero powering a lot, now playing a lot of minions. His best play on turn 6 was a Galaka Crawler.
This was a play I was going to say. Dirty Rat, hope it pulls nothing.
And then what? Kazan make his Mystic?
I think he was, if it was going to pull something small, he was going to Hellfire it away. And if it pulled nothing, then he was going to Kazan Mystic.
Is he dead? Oh, I think he doesn't have enough mana to actually do this because he can't Hero Power and Double Bolt with Jade Lightning. I think he's 1 off. If I count correctly. He's got 6 damage through the Lightning Bolts going into the 2/6. And then if all things go face with Jade Lightning, that's 14. And if he had enough mana to Hero Power, that would be it.
And this is one of those awkward points for Alb where he's thinking, well, do I expend burn? Which means I have less burn should Reno come out. Do I have the read that my opponent doesn't have Reno Jackson and I can try and go all in here and set it for a 2-turn lethal?
Yeah, I actually don't mind that, primarily because Jade Lightnings are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So I think being able to spend 1 here is fine. The question becomes if he wants to overload with the Feral Spirits. He'll still be at 6 mana, but that means he can't play it, the Crackle, for example, if he picks it up. Or he could, but he has to ditch one of the Lightning Bolts. The question is if he wants to Lightning Bolt here or if he wants to just play Feral Spirits. And he recognizes that the 3 damage AoE would end up killing the Kazan Mystic as well. And GeneraL is dealing with quite the big board of post-Reno damage, TJ.
Oh, yeah. If he Reno's here, he's staring at 8 + 8, 16 points of damage. There is...
Right. You can remove 4 of it with Kazan Mystic and a Dark Bomb. But I'm pretty sure this is the end of the line of Reno hiding behind that leaf. He needs to come out from the bushes, reveal himself... And I'm pretty sure Alb kind of knows, too, based off the way he's been playing. He's been trying to hedge his bets against a potential Reno Jackson.
He is tucked all the way over there.
Yeah. He's scared, man. He's got stage fright.
Surprise!
He's just wondering if he's going to be just as good as he used to be back in his prime. Old Reno just doesn't have the same explosion athleticism. Looks like he's going to probably just go with the Reno Jackson. I think you probably want to just think about every other possibility, but there's not really much going on here.
Yeah.
And when you said that there's 12 damage post-Reno, I mean, Alb's also got additional 10 in the hand. It's not too far from piecing together a potential game-ending push. Portal's nice. It actually ends up killing the 4-1, which he wanted to find a way to be able to keep his board, develop, and be able to continue to push damage here. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Alb kind of even think about throwing in the Jade Lightning because he could also play Burn off the top because right now he can't fit everything else.
And he's going to go with sort of cleaning up the board a little bit. He knows that GeneraL has to clear and heal at this stage in the game. And it's going to be really tough for him to do both.
Man, how long has this Flame's Faces stayed alive, TJ?
A very long. It came down on turn 4, so it's been alive for 4 turns now. It's going to be alive for an extra turn now.
Dealt 28 damage and counting. Oh. I need a sign that says X turns since Flame Faces attacked.
It's been 13, 14. Picks up Totem Golem. He needed direct damage.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. This.
Oh my goodness! Because of Jiraxis, right? He's going to be able to heal back up to 15.
And he's got Defender of Argus as well to back it up. But, of course, in Wild, have access to a little bit more potent burn spells like Crackle.
Wow. I wonder how important that Farseer's picked up. Maybe GeneraL feels like he can get away with not playing Jiraxis' turn because he still can't remove the board fully.
His trades just aren't that great right now.
But you can take a pretty nice proactive trade. You can Defender of Argus. And then, he probably wants to play a Farseer with that instead of playing Sylvanas, right?
Yeah, Earthring Farseer and then taunt up the Farseer with the...
yeah, I can see that.
With the Abyssal Enforcer, so that way whatever the Flaming Faces trades into, it's going to die.
I like it. And no life tap, right? We don't want to be too greedy.
Nope.
11's pretty safe. Double Crackles can do it.
Yeah, Crackle, Lightning Bolt as well. We'll see.
Lava Burst is also lethal.
Feral Spirits.
That's huge. That is massive. And the fact that GeneraL can have a taunt before he plays Jiraxis could end up being game-ending here. As GeneraL looks like he's weathered the storm. How many Death Throws have died? I don't think any have actually died there for GeneraL yet.
I don't think so.
So it looks like Drax
Mistress of Mixtures, I think, is the only one.
Okay, well, GeneraL just has a way to flip the switch, start winning, because that's the important thing too. Is you have to put the aggro shaman on a clock themselves, otherwise they're just going to keep drawing damage. I mean, Alb pretty much drew all of his minion-based stuff outside of like his tunnel trogs. He pretty much just has burn remaining in his deck at this point.
He even saved the health by not taking the valuable trade into the Feral Spirit, and another minion picked up, and that's not even a minion that you could play on the board as a proactive threat.
Yeah, that is ugly draw. And the thing is, Alb doesn't even have a winner off the top. He needs to have 2 draws.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure GeneraL's going to be able to put him on a 2-turn clock here as soon as he attacks and just develops.
Sure. Yeah.
So that pretty much does it here, I think. Unless Alb is able to whip out something that we're not expecting. If he has Ancestral Knowledge and be able to draw 2 cards, that would be his out.
Deathwing, perhaps? No, Deathwing wouldn't even do it because Sylvanas is on the board.
No. An aggro shaman looks like it falls again. GeneraL 1 game away from guaranteeing the spot a trip to the finals.
Yeah, and he's in the winners bracket, which means he's just been on a complete win streak throughout this 64-player open bracket tournament, and you could tell the little bit of sort of relief on his face, but also, pride in himself. He gave himself a little fist bump there at the end, and still looking a little bit stressed, but I would be too. He's playing for a trip to good old sunny California.
That's right, and it's beautiful weather around this time of year specifically, so GeneraL, of course, probably more concerned about just being able to win and get his name out there. And more importantly, he's been able to corner this aggro shaman for 2 games now, and he's got Druid remaining. We do know that Druid has a few different archetypes that you can play, primarily the aggressive token-style Druid or Egg Druid. And you can also play a Jade Druid style. I've also seen some people experiment with combo style stuff because Aviana is still now in Wild, and a lot of people love doing that kind of stuff with Druid. But I for the most part, I gotta wonder, how much does Alb have here left in the tank be able to fight back, because he's down 2 games.
Yeah, we'll see. He's going to think about it for a bit, but in the meantime, we talked about GeneraL making it through a good road, but both these players have faced off against a ton of great opponents going through the 64-player bracket. And there you can see their roads. GeneraL has only lost a single game on his road to get to this top 4, and that was to Fubar in the 3rd round. And every other match that he's played has been a 3-0, and it looks like he's on the path to do it again.
Dude, that would mean that he has won 6 series and dropped 1 game, 18-1 score. That's over a 95% win rate.
Yeah. Alb had some close calls there. He's playing...
Or just under 95. Sorry.
Yeah. He played against Chin Noise, I believe, who plays for the Hearthstone Global Games, I believe, for Team Belgium. So he's a relatively known player, at least in the European scene. But, his lineup just doesn't seem to be performing as well. I mean, he's still won every match thus far, but he's had some close calls.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about. Is the Reno Dex the big tournament top dog here? We look at the data report that was released just hours ago and proof that it's live, not pre-recorded, is the fact that Reno decks just don't have that high of a win percentage on ladder.
Yeah.
And a lot of people feel like maybe that's just because of the environment of the ladder, but maybe it's indicative of the fact of there's certain decks that we're not paying attention to. You mentioned Paladin being one of them. However, this tournament kind of leans the other way. I think Warlock and Mage have been crushing it so far in this top 64.
Yeah, Priest having one of the highest win rates in Europe really tells you a lot about how these control-style decks are doing well. I mean, there's a lot of types of Priests. There's also like sort of the Miracle Priest or OTK Priest, whatever you want to call it. But we're going to move into it. Alb on the verge of being knocked into the lower bracket now. In GeneraL, 1 more game win, and he's going to the live finals. So it is going to be Jade Druid and Alb trying again, aggro shaman. Now, this is a much better matchup than the previous 2 that we saw.
Yeah, Jade Druid still is pretty weak to pressure, but for the most part, they still have some anti-aggro tools available to them. We don't... I mean, the big difference that Jade Druid has between Wild and Standard is pretty much just cards like Living Roots and Raven Idols, if you even have them.
Yeah.
You might see maybe only 1 Auctioneer versus 2. You might not even see that many late-game taunts because they still have Ancient Awards and maybe like 1 Primordial Drake.
Yeah, Azure Drake and Sludge Belcher also consideration just for the power levels of the card in general.
True that.
But, sometimes players don't even run those, so it is a very tight package that you have to run there. But getting into it a little bit. Alb did not get off to a great start, and GeneraL's off to a fantastic start. He was able to get ramp. He's able to get the Jade Behemoth out early. So he's already got his mana ramp. He's already got his Jade ramp. And he's starting to get rid of some of this pressure.
Flame Face is really useful as well to help put some pressure onto the board. But it looks like GeneraL still should be able to stabilize here.
It does involve getting rid of his board, though. But I don't think he's too upset about that, considering Flame Faceless is, you know, probably one of the only big threats in the deck besides the second one, or Aya.
Yeah, it's basically the biggest individual minion that you'll have to play, and so removing that means that this is probably the most damage you'll take from one single source. And we saw the previous game how threatening it is to just leave up that Flame Faceless for an extended period of time. A little spectator bug here is Alb clearly has played that Flame Faceless. Looks like he's picked up Surfinley Mirgleton, going to be looking for Life Tap or Steady Shot. Picks up Steady Shot, which is nice, and GeneraL already did use one of the Pharaoh Rages. Yeah. So I think that alone keeps Alb in the game right now.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if Earthen Scales is... I know Earthen Scales is sometimes a popular choice in the deck, but it's not in all of the wild Jade Druid decks, because you do have, you know, other powerful tools that you have to consider when talking about, you know, just the sort of that mid-game package. But we'll definitely have to see as this game goes on. Another Innervate picked up, so there's going to be power turns potentially able to come out for GeneraL in the next few turns. He does have Gadzan Auctioneer, but he's just going to use it now. He feels like he wants to get on the board. It looks like Innervate Coin Jade Spirits on the menu.
Yeah, it's just really powerful to get it out immediately there, so that way you can get out as much proactive board as you can. If your opponent does even have things like Flame Tongue Totem to proactively trade, you're just going to dominate onto the board.
Look at that damage from hand.
Yeah, he's going face.
There's only one plan here. He's going to weave in hero powers, be as efficient as possible with his damage. Hope that GeneraL doesn't have armor gain.
Yeah, but
and he'll get there.
On the flip side, I mean, he will. Is he going to get there next turn?
He does have mana for Crackle Crackle and Lava Burst, which is at least 11.
Ooh, you know, he plays Gadget and Auctioneer onto the board to try to be greedy because he saw his opponent went face with the burn. But, I mean...
Let's test it out with the first Crackle.
4? Is that enough?
Well, he needs 6 from this.
Whoa! 1 damage off.
Yeah, I think this is a hero power slated for this one, and then next turn you have 7 damage with Lava Burst plus hero power.
Man. And GeneraL played this Auctioneer, I think, because he wants to hit
Earthen Scales.
Potential card like Earthen Scales. He can draw a little bit more first with Wrath to see if he can pick up another form of life gain, and I have to imagine he does. Another Earthen Scales. That guarantees him at least 6 life.
And he draws 2 cards from the Wrath.
Oh my goodness. And he's also able to remove the board while developing. And he's also got a lot of damage too. How much damage he's got right now? 5, 10, 13, 17, 18 damage?
Oh my goodness. All of his armor gain.
Wow. I mean, brutal.
To be honest.
Absolutely brutal, TJ.
That is insane.
That is
Alb987 concedes.
GeneraL qualifies for the finals with an 18-1 score, dropping 1 individual game throughout his entire rampage of the upper bracket.
And you could tell him just write something to his note. He just like put another check mark next to it. Like he has like a notepad that just has a big 3-0 next to it, and he puts another tally on the 3-0 mark.
Are you kidding me? This is absolute destruction of the entire field, and he brought a non-aggressive lineup at all. He brought Jade Druid, Reno Mage, and Reno Warlock, and all of these decks are really good at control matchups.
Yeah.
They do have anti-aggro tools, and they are slightly favored against some of these decks, but, you know, Jade Druid's known for killing a lot of Reno decks. And so, you know, it's really interesting that he's able to corner these aggressive decks as well and dominate as clearly as he did. Like we've mentioned, just under 95% win rate. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and, you know, as we see the Jade Druid take a win, I like to take a moment and sort of